Welcome to part 2 of our Gimp tutorials. This one's on photo sizing and the correction of banner photos. So as we get started, one of the first things that we have to look at, and I mentioned this in the Collaborate session last week, is that our file management is really critical and that we have a really well thought out hierarchy of file folders to move our work through. You want to have the workflow where you have a project file, you have a section subfolder, and then you may have another subfolder for different file types in there. So it's really important. You're going to start making 3 or 4, 5 or 6, maybe even more versions of sometimes one photograph. So you need to have different folders and different subfolders to save all the work in. And I'll explain the file types and how and why we're saving different photos as we go along. Okay, so let's get to work and see how we're going to process the photos that we're going to use in our week 2 and our week 4 assignments, especially the ones that go into your final project with the web page. So I'm going to go up to the upper left hand corner to File. I'm going to get the drop down. I'm going to open so I can get my banner photo that I have that needs processing. Again, notice my file flow that I have here. I have a major folder for everything on the C drive. I have a folder for the Stratcom courses. I have a folder for this specific course, and I have another subfolder underneath that course along with the weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2 or 3 other subfolders. So looking in that particular folder, I want to take this original one, San Francisco Bay and Skyline Raw. I'm going to double click on that. I call those raw because it's very, very important that the original photo you take, you always keep that photo so you can go back and reconstruct things with it. So if all else fails, then you can go back and start over. So that's one of the reasons why you need different folders and subfolders too sometimes to keep all these different things straight. If you're doing a large product, it's good to have one with the raw photos, one with your program file photos. If it's Photoshop, it would be a PSD file. It'll be an XCF file here with Gimp. So I'm going to open this up. And now you can see a photo that I took of San Francisco Bay. Took it with a $99 camera. Does a pretty good job, but not the greatest, and we're going to fix that. So you probably might have wondered what the navigation tool was for that we opened up in part 1. If you look in the upper right hand corner of the screen, I'm going to click on that navigation tab, and you can see it has a little postage stamp of the photo, which is in the main window. I'm going to kind of make it a little bit smaller, and that's a little bit too small, a little bit too big, so let me try. Down at the bottom there's a little sliding bar. It reacts a little bit, overreacts, and it takes a couple clicks to get it right. But I want to start out with this because I'm going to do some things. I need a little border around it and good stuff like that. So the first thing that I want to do, I want to assess this photo and review the photo for its strengths and weaknesses. Strengths, it's a great day, really nice clouds above. It has the potential to be a really nice photo. A couple things that are not so good with it. The color doesn't really pop out. If you look at the landmass going from left to right, you can see that the camera was slightly tilted and it's not level. So these are all things that we can fix and we can work with. So I think the first thing that I want to do is I want to point out up at the top and on the left-hand side, we have rulers, so we can see basically how large things are and give us an idea of, when we're looking at it, of where we want to crop things, cut things, good stuff like that. So if you're making something for print, you probably don't want these in pixels. You should probably change them to inches. If you're preparing something for the web, then you definitely want them in pixels. So I have these already set up for pixels so we don't have to worry about it. What I do have to worry about is the image size. So one of the first things I want to do is I want to go up to this menu item up above that says image. And I'm going to look at that and I'm going to click on that. And I'm just going to find out what I'm working with to start. We'll have to come back to this a couple times. I'm going to go down to the scale image and I'm going to click that. And then that's going to tell me the size of my photo. So as I begin to look at it here, I have more than enough pixels for the width of a banner. I have over 3,000 pixels. Height has a couple thousand. The resolution is 180, 180. I would want to keep that if I was going to put this for print. I would even ideally have a higher resolution like 300 by 300, but the camera took 180 and 180, so that's what it is. But I'm going to use this in the web, and I really only need 72, maybe even 96. Sometimes you can do that. It makes the photo a little bit bigger. But 72 will be fine for the web. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take the resolution, highlight it, turn it down to 62. I think if I click outside the box, then it'll do the same thing for the other one. They're clicked inside, so both are 72. For now, I'm going to leave this size, and I'll change that a little bit later and get it closer to the target. I probably am going to keep it about 2,000, 22,000 wide. The height I'm not going to worry about. I'm going to keep that ratio the same, so that'll be a good thing. So see how these looks like little chains there. So when those chains are there, they're locked. I can click it, and well, these are going to stay locked. So that's a good thing for this. So I am from there going to basically say scale, and because I went to 72 pixels per inch, you can see now the photo is wider and it fills up more of the screen. I'm going to have to go back to the navigation, shrink it down again a little bit, go through a bunch of clicks. Now I got a pretty good working size. Okay, so now the next thing I have to do, I got my image size pretty close, ballpark. I'll work with it more at the end of this, and then before I put it into a web page, I would work with it more once I'm looking at the web page and I know kind of exactly what size area I want it to cover. So the next thing we're going to start to do is to correct the photo itself, because you can see it's tilting to the left a little bit, and that's not the best thing. So there's a pretty simple solution to that. First thing I'm going to do is, if you click up in the rulers in the top and hold the click and drag down, or if you do the same thing from the side, you'll pull down what's called a guide. So I'm going to go up to the top, I'm going to click, I'm going to drag, and you'll see a little guideline coming across the whole screen. Well, I'm going to get this in here and try to get it so right about dead center there. The guideline gets right in the dark spot in the center. You can see it's higher on the left and, higher on the right and then lower on the left. So I'm going to use the rotation function to get this photo leveled to start before I go do anything else, and then you'll also see why I didn't finish sizing the photo at that particular point in time. So remember I said the rotation tool was a good one to have handy, and I put it over here right in the right hand side of the tool. So I'm going to click the rotation, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click up in here, and then I'm going to have to move off that a little bit lower. Then I click and I drag to the right, and see how I can rotate the photo very, very easily with the rotate tool. And I'm going to look at where I pulled my guideline across, and I want to get that so it's fairly equal all the way across, and I think that's going to do it. I have the line right through the land on the left, right underneath the center point where I wanted, and there's a little bit in the far right of more water back there, and by perspective that's going to be a little further back, a little higher. So I think that's a good rotation. All I have to do now is press enter on the keyboard, and it should have straightened out the photo, but again, apparently like the issue I had in part 1, not all of the commands get through. That's only happening because I have the Camtasia running to capture the screen. When you press the enter, it'll do its thing and it'll rotate it like it should. So to get rid of the guide, we don't need it anymore, so I'm going to go up to the little cross, which is the move tool, which I have on the side where it's real handy. And you can see that when I put my cursor over the guide, it turns red, so I'm going to click and just drag it back up to the top of the screen where it came from, and it's gone. Okay, so then the next thing that we have to do with this is we have to select the section that I'm going to use for the banner and then crop that out. And I want to have, the rule of thirds that you use in screen and photo composition. I want to have the interesting parts about a third from the bottom and about a third from the top. So I'm going to start out, I'm going to go back up to the upper left hand side there, get the rectangle selection tool. I can even start from outside if I want a little bit, close to the edge, doesn't matter that much. I think I'm going to start a little bit high and get a wider area to initially start like this. So I'm going to click, I'm going to drag with the selection tool. Be a little outside, that's okay, and then I'm going to go down even a little bit lower, and then I'll let go. And you'll see that there's little boxes in the corners, and there's little tabs which pop out on all the different sides. So if I want to adjust this now, all I have to do is get my cursor in that box and click, and you can see I can pull down that selection area, and the selection area is going to be on the top. So I want to get in here so I have about a third where the skyline is of the city. I want to have that in the bottom third, so I'm going to lower this a little bit more. Then I'm going to get that towards the top. So now I'm pretty well in the third here. I could get it maybe just a little further up, a little less water. And then I want to have a third in the top up here. It's really kind of pretty clouds here, so I want to keep those clouds going. And I can get over this one big building. I can see that cloud centered about a third above the big building, just a little bit lower. I can probably bring the top down just a tiny bit. So I'm going to click on that and draw that down a little bit more so I can still get this nice cloud on the right in there a little bit. And I think that's going to do it. So I'm going to use that for my selection. Now all I have to do to have my banner is to go up to the upper left there where it says image in the menus, click image, go down to crop, not crop to content, but crop to selection just above that. So far I've done quite a bit of work, but I haven't saved the photo yet. So this is a perfect point in time to go up to File and Save As. Now remember, I don't want to overwrite that file, so now I want to make sure instead of it saying San Fran Bay and Skyline Raw, I'm going to take out the raw and I'm going to do 1, just the letter there, so I know that it's one version of it, and I'll probably just put the V before it so I know it's version 1. And it's going to save it as an XCF, which is the extension for the program file. Now the banner's begun to take shape. We want to work with it a little bit more and start the color correction process. I'm going to go back to the Navigator tab up here, and I'm going to blow this up just a little bit. It's kind of hard to with the degree of this control, but I'll try to get a little smaller than that. So now I have a fairly decent size, and I can see a little bit better of the detail. I can see it's not very sharp, and the color's just kind of a little flattish. It doesn't pop out. So I'm going to do a couple things. Very first thing to do when you're color correcting is to go to the Levels command. So we want to go to the Colors File menu up above there, and then if we look down a little bit further, we should see the levels. So the levels opens up a dialog box. I'm going to move it around because it's kind of right over the areas that I want to see. So there's a couple things. There's a thing called a histogram here. They've reversed the color from the Photoshop one. The background would be light and the histogram would be black in Photoshop. So they're doing the opposite. It's basically the same kind of tool, just works a little bit differently. One of the bummers in this program is some of the sliders and things are very, very small. If you look at the very left end and the very right end, you'll see there's tiny little triangles there. Same thing with the output levels. And those are the things that you have to grab to get it to work. And usually when you see a histogram like this and you see it curved down and then there's nothing, it's flat, that means you have to grab that little triangle down there and you have to pull that in, and then that's going to get to the direction. You pull it usually right up to the triangle there. We can see that makes it a little hot, a little too dark, so I'm going to go back to where I started and I'm going to go a little bit more slower here. We want to get a little bit of darkness, a little bit of, you know, context in there like I have. Let me see if I can go a little bit further. I think that'll do it pretty good. You could check the output levels, try that slider, see what happens. Pulling it over, it's just lightening it up, and the photo really doesn't need to be lighted at all any more than it is. So I think that's going to be pretty good. So I'm going to click OK. Another thing I can do to perk this photo up a little bit is go into the colors menu up top, and from there there's kind of a cool thing called hue and saturation, and you can see the dialog box come up, and I'm going to bump up the saturation just a little bit. We'll see. Again, I can go right in the middle. I can click and drag here. There we go. So you don't want to get too much saturation in there. You can see how everything's getting all bluish and stuff like that. You want to add just enough saturation to kind of pop the colors out just a little bit more. You could always use, in all these boxes you'll see in the lower left hand side there's a preview. So you can click the little dot before the preview and see what it looks like without the tool, and then see what it looks like with the tool. Not much difference there, so I think probably I'll pull it a little further up to the right, and we'll see what that does. Maybe a little bit too far, so a little bit back to the left. You'll see that you need to have patience. There's a lot of trial and error when you're doing this, and if you have patience and you wait until your eyes tell you, well, wow, that's the way it should be. Now, I think that's a pretty good place to have it. The clouds, it brings out the gray in the clouds, it brings out the blue in the skies. So I'm going to click OK, and we'll see what it does overall. I'm going to go back to the navigator here, and I'm going to go back down just a little bit so we can see most of it. And I think we got a pretty good thing going there now. Really nice blue sky. The water's a little bluer. One last thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to bump it up in size again a little bit, and I'm going to go up to a thing called a filter here in the menu at the top. And then from there I'm going to go to enhance, and from there I'm going to go down to a little tool called the sharp, and in parentheses unsharp mask. And this is kind of a cool thing to have because it will sharpen the photo. It was taken at a distance, it didn't have the best resolution, so I'm going to use this. I'm going to go back here a little bit, try to pull across so I can see kind of where that heart of the city is there on the left hand side. See if I can get that a little clearer. There's the radius, there's the amount. The amount is low, so I'm going to grab that, the slider, I'm going to click and drag it to the right, and not too far, but just enough for a little bit. These are a little stubborn. Get a little more. The radius, I want to actually soften up a little bit to about 2.5. And I think that's going to give me kind of some pretty good separation. You want to be careful with this tool. You don't want to pull like all the way to the right. When I do that, I'll hit the preview. I'm not getting the preview yet, so I'll click that on. You can see moving that amount makes quite a bit of difference, moving that to the right. So I'm going to take that down again a bit here so it'll look decent. It's really getting resistant and not wanting to come. So let's see. There we go. So the amount's obviously a little bit too much for it. Just going to go a little bit up. Try it back down. And obviously it needs to go up a little more. And right about there, I think 3 is going to go pretty good. The radius, let's bump that down a little bit. A lot of times about 1.5 or 2 is kind of good for that. So now I can bring the amount up again a little bit. And I think that brings a little bit more clarity to the subject. So now I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to bring this back down in size just a little bit so we can see what the whole thing looks like. And I think we have a pretty good banner now. Last but not least, now we have a pretty close to finished product. You might have to resize it a little bit to get it into the web page where you're going to use it. But we took kind of an average shabby photo that was tilted to the left, and we made something really fabulous out of it with some really good software. So when you're managing a PR campaign, a marketing campaign, don't accept poor photos and poor images. You want something that really pops out. You want something where you have good contrast and color. You want something that has sharp definition. It can be achieved with software. So I'm going to simply go to File, and I'm going to one last time click Save, and then I can probably use it for different things. I still have it saved as version 1, and I'm going to have to do some things we'll show you in the last part 4 in terms of compressing these things down so they're smaller. But this is a really good kind of a master to work from, and then you'll make different copies from this. All right, thank you for paying attention, and next on the part 3 we're going to look at again color correction and the shadow highlight function and how we can rescue some photos that have been pretty dark because the sun was behind the subject instead of in front of the subject.